This is Althea Hogle. She's here to talk about floriculture in the Flathead Valley. We're lucky to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you all for being here. I feel like we have the best view right now for the afternoon. And up here on this view, we'll get to see a lot of pictures of beautiful flowers and daydream of summertime. So we are going to be talking about floriculture in the Flathead Valley. What do I have to do with that? Oops, how do I move? It's not letting me. Sorry, I thought we had it.
Yeah, I thought we had it too. I'm less familiar with it.
There we go.
Okay.
I just had to click on it. Okay. So my name is Althea Hogle, and I am the owner of Fhyllary Farm. I'm a small cut flower farm located just down in Kalispell. I grow on about 1 acre to 2 acres of land. I only have about 1 acre in production between field crops and greenhouses. I started this farm 3 years ago during COVID with the intent to bring positivity and connection to our community through something that's just quintessentially a human force, something that we're all excited about. I mean, if somebody hands you a beautiful flower, you can't resist but smile. And I think that that's super powerful. And just some fun trivia. The farm's name is Fhyllary Farm. I'm a botany nerd. And a Phyllary is a diagnostic trait of the aster family, which is the largest flowering family. And we couldn't have some of the most prized flowers without a Phyllary, which is part of the whole of the flower. If you know the fabled sunflower, the green bracts that create the head of the flower, one of those is a Phyllary. So I look at this farm as just one piece of the whole agricultural system for the Flathead Valley and for our community. I'm excited. We're going into our 3rd year, growing flowers, ready for all the snow to melt. And so we're looking at floriculture, and definition here for you. It's basically growing flowers, but floriculture or flower farming is a branch of horticulture, and it's concerned with the cultivation of flowering and ornamental plants. So woody ornamentals are in there, similarly like pussy willow and ninebark. And they're for gardens and floristry. So they create the floral industry. Another sector of floriculture is the development of new varieties and plant breeding. So you'll see seed production is also a branch of floriculture. You're all here probably because you have some relationship to loving flowers. We all do. We hold them very dear in our hearts and in our society. They're a way for us to connect with the environment around us and bring a little bit of nature into our modern domestic lives. They really demand us to get close to them, connect with them, touch them, smell them, feel them, and most of all, to share them. They're a way that we communicate and convey powerful emotions without any talking. Welcome. Feel free to sit wherever. We're just talking about flowers. We see floriculture used for celebrating and for mourning and for cultural celebrations, all of that. They are very important in our day-to-day life. And with the demand that comes from our love for flowers in our society, we have seen a whole global floral industry take shape. Before we talk about floriculture here in the Flathead Valley, we need to kind of zoom out and see the whole picture of the global floral industry. It's about a $40 billion industry, and this is growing, and it's projected to just keep growing. So it's a huge billion-dollar industry with lots of moving pieces. 80% of cut flowers are imported into the US, and most of the exporting countries are Netherlands, Colombia, Ecuador, Kenya, and Ethiopia. These are warm and humid climates, and these regions typically have like cheaper labor, and that has contributed to their dominance in the global floral industry, but it has also come with a high cost for sustainability and environmental pollution. The United States, Europe, and Japan are the biggest importers. So our demand here in the States is driving the production of these kind of more developing countries to be creating a global industry that's based on quick, cheap flowers. Another thing that has aided in the global industry really becoming so big is our need to have certain flowers when we want them and have them be uniform and perfect, kind of similar to food. We want to eat out of season. We want our flowers in the middle of February when they wouldn't be growing here in Montana. So this has driven the demand. And keeping up for this world demand involves so many moving parts, from breeders to growers, farm workers, shippers, wholesalers, retailers. And this out of season demand has created cultivation practices that are less than ideal for many reasons. Floriculture has kind of taken a book from the Green Revolution. It's a major agricultural commodity. And in order to keep things cheap, we've been mass producing things with monocrops and artificial growing environments. This takes a ton of heat, energy, human resources, and everything. They also have a pretty heavy pesticide reliance because they're grown in these, getting ahead of myself. It's like a really dirty system, and I just get worked up about it. And seeing all of your beautiful faces. But in these artificial growing areas, disease and pests are really important to monitor. And so they're using a ton of pesticides. And these have extreme human health concerns for the workers. A lot of the pesticides and fungicides have carcinogenic effects, and they also get into the waterways and the soil and the food system. So the local surrounding communities can have a really negative effect on them. Most of flowers are not held to the same constraints for pesticide use because they're not considered a food product. So they're kind of able to get through a lot of environmental concerns with that. Another concern is, on top of pesticides, water use and workforce concerns, is that they generate a ton of carbon emissions because of the refrigeration and long haul. So stems can be transported up to 6,000 miles in refrigerated airplane holds. So they're going from a farm that already has negative environmental impacts into a refrigeration system, onto a truck, to the airport, all in refrigerated systems, shipped, flown really quickly. They only have so many vase lives. It's a natural product. And then they are, again, shipped, flown to wherever they're coming. So if they're coming up to Montana from Colombia for just one day, take Valentine's Day, the carbon emission and the carbon footprint is gigantic. There was a report in 2018 that just from flowers grown in Colombia alone, flown to the US for Valentine's Day, it produced 360,000 metric tons of CO2. And this was according to the International Council on Clean Transportation. So to put that in perspective, that's like equivalent to 78,000 cars driven for 1 year, all for one day, where they're getting red roses and then they're being thrown away because they don't last that long. So really intense standard cultivation practices can get you feeling down. Ask the question of, why do we have it? Why do we want flowers? Where do we go from here? I'm going to take this moment to slow down myself because I'm getting ahead of myself, but also the whole floral industry needs to slow down as well. And we need to go back to that want for seasonal flowers, for enjoying what's in season when it's in season. And in kind of reaction to the nastiness of this, you'll see that groups like the Slow Flower Society and the Slow Flower Movement have arisen. And it's similar to the slow food movement. So here in the United States, the Slow Flower Movement recognizes that there is a disconnect that has disengaged humans from the source and seasonality of their flowers. And the Slow Flowers aims to reconnect flower consumers and professionals in the floral industry to the sources of those flowers. So similar to what happened with the slow food movement, producers that are part of this are really aimed at keeping sustainability in mind, care for the land in mind, care for the flowers, and humans and animal health. So you will see that we are using natural and organic practices pretty large scale in the local flower movement. Pledge allegiance to American grown flowers. There's a great amount of flowers farms in just America alone. The tides are turning. You may not see them at Smith's because they're wanting the cheapest flowers, but there are so many ways to connect to local flower farmers and producers, either through the Slow Flower Society that has a flower farm map, or American Grown Flowers. Certified American Grown Flowers is a great resource. That's just in our country. So even if you're getting flowers from California, they still are not traveling as long. So placing value on American grown flowers kind of eliminates that. It's an act of just caring more, and it will drive the market. Sorry, I'm getting a little nervous and ahead of myself. Let's talk about something more fun. So why do we grow local flowers? They don't have to be shipped. They're right at your disposal to use, fresh picked from the farm. These are a beautiful type of dahlia that I grow. This is called Mambo. And when you're using local flowers or seasonal flowers, they're delicate. They're actually fragrant. They've been grown with a lot of care. And they're things that don't ship. So you won't see them in the farm, and they're even more special. We have a lot of amazing local florists that actually do buy in local product from our flower farms. So as we see, the industry has changed. We're getting more American grown. We're getting more flower farmers in Montana. We recently have had a Montana Cut Flower Association started this last year. That's mission is to facilitate greater awareness of locally grown flowers across Montana and within our local communities, and create connectivity between growers and consumers that protect the integrity of our market by providing education and networking opportunities. So this is all Montana. As you can see, it stretches from northwestern to southeastern. Pretty great for an 88-day growing period. Here in the Flathead Valley, we have a pretty large number of flower farmers as well. This was also taken from the Montana Cut Flower Association webpage. This is a pretty big list. It's definitely not all of them, and there's more flower farms popping up all the time. The beauty of them is we have a very large valley and enough people to sustain the need for local flowers through CSAs, farmers markets, the wedding industry is huge up here. So there's great resources to connect in with all of them. And here in the Flathead Valley, we've also started a flower collective that is a group of 5 of us and growing, which is commercial sellers working together to, again, increase awareness of local flowers. Flower farms come in at tons of different shapes and sizes. So this is where we're going to get into what's actually happening here in the Flathead Valley. This is my farm. It's, like I said, it's about an acre when it's all said and done between greenhouse space and field space. Some farms look like this with kind of more uniform long lines of flowers. This just helps with production and trying to really get it up so you can be fulfilling CSA, farmers markets, weddings, wholesale orders. It helps just kind of streamline that. But this isn't the only model that works. A lot of people grow on micro farm backyard garden size pots and take more of like a permaculture aspect and design and cut from their garden that is really fluid and beautiful. They all have their benefits and just depends on the system of the farmer. Most of us do have to use season extension, which we'll talk about in a second. So this can come in the form of greenhouses. This is a caterpillar tunnel from Farmers Friends, or even just a simple like sheet with hoops underneath it will insulate things when it's really cold. Speaking of seasonality, we're all in Montana and we all know how it can be. It could be like yesterday where it's a blizzard every 15 minutes, and it can be like today where it's warm and you want to take your jacket off. Growing in this climate has a ton of hurdles to go through, and it's beautiful, but it can leave you feeling like that picture on the right. That was last April when we had a really cold snap after I had transplanted out all of our tender perennials or annuals. So this graph or table is taken from our Farmer's Almanac. Just gives you a snapshot of our growing season, which if you garden, you're very familiar with. Our last spring frost usually happens around June 7th. And this, if you plant out flowers on June 7th, you won't get them until like the end of July. So for cultivating flowers for commercial aspects, you have to take some risks, and that can be a little daunting sometimes, but usually it works out okay. Flowers are pretty resilient. The first fall frost is September 4th generally. This last year we had a sneaky long fall, which was really wonderful, but the book basically says we have an 88-day growing period. Most flowers need over 100 days to fully mature. So how do we do that? We get pretty thrifty. This is our greenhouse, propagation house, and I usually start seedlings in there in mid-March. But before that, myself and many other growers start in their room in their basement. Sometimes they use their walk-in cooler, which I've done, and heat it starting in like late July or late January and mid-February for some flowers that take a long time. So we'll talk about those varieties too. And then you plant out kind of in April, depending on the flower's needs. On our farm, we have like 200 different varieties that we grow. So kind of timing all of those things is a science, and you just learn by trial and error, with also great growing resources that you can find out online or in books. But it doesn't always go as planned. When it does go as planned, you get beautiful, beautiful flowers. So this is kind of our season snapshot. There on the top right is our narcissus and tulips. Those usually start depending on the growers. Some growers are forcing them right now, and you can get tulips from Missoula from Field 5 Farm, which means they've been frozen, pre-frozen, and then started in greenhouse and crates and forced. I have not tested that. It seems a little daunting to me, but people do it, and it's amazing when they do. Otherwise, tulips and narcissus usually come Mother's Day about, and they'll carry you into end of May, and then you'll have ranunculus and anemones, which are our cormed variety flowers. They are my favorite. They come in so many different colors and shapes and sizes, and they're fragrant, and they last forever. When we're talking about vase life and keeping flowers and the essence of a local flower, the ranunculus is like the creme de la creme. So we buy those corms and we pre-soak them and get them started, and then plant them out into a greenhouse in March or into the field in April. I do usually 2 plantings, so they get little extra time in a succession in there. The next season goes in between, and it's kind of patchy. In June, you think everything's flowering, the trees have their leaves, everything should be going, but for a flower farmer, they're just not quite there yet in full. And so there's a transition period where you're maybe foraging out to find like pennycress, which most people consider a weed. In floriculture, it is considered a valuable crop, which is kind of funny. But as we get into July, we get beautiful flowers like Nigella. This is one of the flowers that the reason why I started flower farming. It's really beautiful and it turns, it's like Cinderella dress color, and then its ovary swells up, puffs up, and creates this dried seed pod that looks like an octopus. And it's striped maroon and lime green. It's really beautiful. And then we switch into the blooms. Here's a zinnia, cosmo, and straw flower. They're like the height of midsummer blooms, really colorful. And they can also, some of them can be dried. So around mid-July, we start harvesting for dried to keep us through into the winter. Bells of Ireland. Has anybody enjoyed Bells of Ireland? They're amazing. They smell super good. They're really cool texture and floral design. And you never really see a green flowers. That's really nice. Dahlias. Dahlias are like the quintessential flower crop, especially for local flower farmers. We're not growing roses, so the dahlia is kind of like our next biggest focal bloom. They're a lot of work. They are a tuber, so it's like a genetic clone, almost like a potato, and you have to dig them out every fall, divide them, store them properly, which is really tricky. They're very finicky, and then start them out when the soil is above 60 degrees. So they require a lot of maintenance and hard love, and they don't really always come on until the end of August. And sometimes we're known to get a frost in September. So you might only get them for 2 weeks, but those 2 weeks are amazing. This year with our amazing fall, which I hope that continues on, I planted them in our hoop house and they stayed until end of October, which was really wonderful. Then we're moving into our late season crops. You'll see more like Rudbeckia, grasses, and Lisianthus. This here is a Lisianthus. It is also known pretty much as the flower farmer's actual like rose replacement because of its many petals. It looks like a rose, but it doesn't have thorns. It has a wonderful vase life. It's really beautiful and has really cool muted tones for floral design use. Then after the frosts come, we are relying on our saved flowers that we dried for floral design. This is a long list. This is not all of them, but it can be found on websites and on the recorded thing if you want to reference it back. You see there's a lot of transitional species that if you start them with enough time in between, you kind of get them for 2 seasons, not just one. So like I said, in my convoluted, anxious speaking about the floral industry, the slow flower movement really aims at bringing it back down to soil health and resiliency for the land. So you see that growers here locally in the Flathead Valley, as well as in the rest of Montana, really pride themselves on sustainable practices, just which that word gets really thrown out a lot, but practices that aid in continuing soil health and resiliency for the land. So our field preparation techniques try to reduce tilling as much as possible. Sometimes, especially when you're establishing a new farm and a new plot, you do need to break up the grasses that are there. You can also use silage tarps to solenize it. But ultimately leaving things in the ground, mulching, using, erosion cover, are all kind of things that many farms use. Organic inputs. I know I don't think many of our flowers do use synthetic nitrogen or anything like that. So we usually use compost, blood meal, bone meal, fish emulsion, all of the really stinky, natural, good stuff. And the flowers love it. Flowers are like very hungry for animal byproducts. They're little vampires. They're really heavy feeders for nitrogen, a lot of them. So if we do fertilize, we use these things. For pest and disease control, it's mostly mechanical, using insect netting for certain things. I have these like dahlia bonnets that I put on to keep grasshoppers out of there. And then also using beneficial insects. In our greenhouse this year, we found praying mantis and their larvae is in there. So I left the entire stand of zinnias that were in there alone, so that those praying mantises can come back in full force next year and take over and kill all the grasshoppers. That's my hope. We'll see if it works. Otherwise, I encourage our U pickers to chop the heads off of grasshoppers whenever they can. A common disease is powdery mildew. And with that, I kind of just, when something gets powdery mildew, I rip it out and take it away. And it's usually done by that point anyways. Water conservation. Last year we had 1,000-year floods. We didn't really need to irrigate until like end of July, which was really nice. And if your soil health is up, the water retention is so much better. And the flowers need water at certain stages, but once they start flowering, the heat of the summer just keeps them going. You'll see a lot of our farms use biodynamic growing principles, working with other animals on the farm and doing kind of changing the field rotations as they go, as well as cover cropping. We've used a nice cover crop cocktail. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but using other crops that bring nutrients back into the soil, giving it a rest from production for a little bit, and using things like legumes, nitrogen fixers that bring atmospheric nitrogen into the soil so that plants can enjoy it. We utilize some of that as well. But really the flowers, they just want to grow, like plant a seed, put it in the dirt, water it. Doesn't have to be a crazy science. You really don't need a lot of inputs. For the most part, they want to grow if you get the timing right. Ways that you can connect into these local flower farms. We have a ton of them around here, and a lot of farmers go to farmers markets. We've got the Whitefish, the Columbia Falls, Big Fork, and Kalispell Farmers Market, as well as I think Libby and Troy have one as well. We have some growers out there that go there too. So find a market, find a flower farmer if you have something that you need flowers for. Some of our farms in the valley offer U-picks. This is a really cool way to just come to the farm and see what it is that we're doing. You might even get more information than my poorly put together presentation. But it's fun. It's a great way to connect with it and get your hands on flowers and see how it goes. Great community event. Weddings. The Flathead Valley is the largest destination wedding location in the state. So that's people just coming afar into Montana, but they're also all looking for local food producers, local vendors, and a lot of local flowers. They want the whole Montana flower feel, and a lot of us do cater to that. And it's really beautiful to help people's love shine through really beautiful flowers that took a lot of love and care to grow. CSA programs, similar to veggie farms, we have community supported agriculture programs or farm subscriptions. A lot of these are offered anywhere between 6 to 10 weeks, every other week, every week. Some of them deliver, some of them are farm pickup only. Some of them are pickup at a different location somewhere. It's a really great way to get to know your farmer, and your farmer gets to know you, and you create this like beautiful friendship of sharing flowers. And it's really special. And I would encourage anybody to try it out if you haven't, either with a veggie farm or a flower farmer. Local florists are a big one too. Some of our local florists really support local farms, and others are still kind of stuck in the quick, easy, traditional route of going through their traditional wholesalers. But the more that people ask their florists for local flowers, the more that they're willing to purchase from a local farmer. And we really make it easy. We have similar pricing schedules. It's just because it's something new for them that they choose not to do it. Last year, our flower collective was really aimed at selling together wholesale, and we had some florists that were really awesome and bought a ton from us and had people wanting it. And we had others that are more traditional that just didn't even try. They didn't even want to take our beautiful product. And that's just a customer-based thing. If their customers don't value it, they don't either. So what really can drive a change in the global world is if our localized consumers here ask for it. Another way you can enjoy flowers is to dive in yourself. I highly recommend trying to grow some flowers. It's fun and it's really challenging, and there's a ton of resources. I'm sure if you went through the seed rooms today, you got a lot of flower seed options. Toss them in the ground, see if it works. They will grow, and it will be really fun to try and design with them. That's how it all starts. And these are some beautiful dahlias from last October. Do you have any questions? I feel like I just rushed through that. Yes.
Where do sunflowers come in? I know for weddings for sure, if the locals have like a microclimate in their backyard or whatever, they just have a massive amount of them.
Yeah.
How does that work into the system to be able to? I didn't see any slides of those. Do the weddings?
Yeah.
Of course, weddings want them, right?
Some weddings do. Yeah, it just depends on the like palette and design style that people are going for. A lot of the times I do get requests for them, and I grow a lot of them. Yes, I don't know why I didn't. They're like the quintessential and my namesake. I guess
Flowers, how long do they last?
it depends on the flower. So sunflowers we harvest them at specific times so that you can get the biggest vase life. So when I harvest a sunflower, I'm actually harvesting it when the petals are closed and keeping it cool. And then it will open in your house, or it will open the day that I'm going to market to sell it. So it hasn't been pollinated yet. And this helps the vase life last a lot longer. So sunflowers, I generally say if you like cut the stems, keep the water clean, they'll last for like 5 to 7 days.
So for you to get it to someone's doing a wedding arrangement,
Mhm.
then you cut it and then you bring it to them and they have a little more than a week for the base life for it, maybe?
Yeah, yep, with sunflowers, things like ranunculus, lisianthus, and even some dahlias, with proper care. So changing water is really important so that bacteria doesn't grow in the water. And if you do that with an arrangement or anything, they can last up to 2 weeks.
Also, if you put EM1 or different things in the water, that keeps the bacteria down.
Yeah,
That
some
makes it
people
last.
put a penny, that's like an old trick, copper. Or even like a little dash of bleach works for some flowers, or you can get flower food that has it in there. It also has a lot of other chemicals in there. But a little sugar and a little bleach goes a long way. Yeah, but that's one thing I definitely flew over was the vase life. If you think about a flower coming from Colombia, it's been cut, it's been held, it's been transported, and it's 5 days till after that till it gets anywhere close to where it's going. Cut flowers from local farmers are cut generally the day before. They're conditioned to get them really hydrated, and they're cut at the like perfect moment so that it can have the longest vase life. So this helps a lot with flowers lasting longer. If you go to the grocery store and buy a bouquet, they kind of die or are already like wilting when you get them. So it's one of the most beautiful things about flowers, I think. They stay longer.
For cooling them, what can I just like stick it in the refrigerator, or is there some?
So the kitchen fridges are held at a cooler temperature than flowers can stand, actually. So they're usually a little too cold and they'll freeze them. I've had a lot of wedding clients accidentally put them in like their event space refrigerator, and the next morning their bridal bouquet is like frozen and limp. So come to the rescue a lot. Cooling, basically 40 degrees is like the sweet spot. A lot of them mostly just want shade, cool water and shade, and you can keep them just fine. And harvesting during the cooler hours of the day, like I start harvesting around 5 and I end at 8 in the heat of the summer because it gets too hot by then, and the flowers will just wilt in the field. So getting them cut early into cold, clean water and into shade will help hold them if you don't have a cooling place. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question based on seeds. So because you're a cotton flower farmer,
Mhm.
what percentage of seeds do you save, if any? And if you're buying seeds every year, what are some good sources you use for your?
Yeah, definitely. So I do save some of my seeds. The seeds that I save are really the prolific ones. I save a lot of larkspur, spearmint, which is Chinese forget-me-nots, and sunflower seeds sometimes, but for the most part, I buy pollenless sunflower seed, so I have to buy that seed every year. Calendula, marigolds. It's really the ones that kind of like produce and drop a lot of seeds that makes it easier. It's something I wish I was better at, to be honest. Just at that time of the year, flower farmers get rather lazy and tired, and don't always do it. And if we do, I'm like putting it just in a grocery bag and forgetting about it until February. But I will say it helps cut down costs for things. For seed, if you can save your own for certain crops. There are crops that you, when you're planning your flower farm, depending on what retail outlet you're going to sell to, if you're selling or if you're just doing it for your own enjoyment, you're trying to get specific color palettes usually. And saving seed, unless you have it down to like the science of hybridizing and everything, it's open pollination. So you can't guarantee that those seeds are going to create the same color the next year, which is really cool. That's how we get awesome zinnia colors that you can't find anywhere else. And they're like a rare special breed that everyone is after now because there was one picture on Pinterest. So you can get into saving your own seeds for a light pale pink zinnia. That is like the market, but it's tricky to control. So I save some seeds. I generally do a large seed order and I go through Johnny's Seeds. It's a great place to start. You can buy small quantities and you can buy huge quantities, and it's relatively affordable. Seed costs have gone up since COVID. My first year to this year, it's like doubled the price, which is a wild thing to see and experience. But Johnny's is a great one. GeoSeed is great. It's kind of archaic. Their ordering system isn't as easy and you have to know all the Latin names, which is beneficial to kind of get to know those flowers as well. You can kind of find cooler varieties that not everybody's growing. And then there's a lot of small seed companies that are coming out of small scale flower farms. A lot of small flower farms also will do seed sales or dahlia tuber sales or corm sales. For me personally, that doesn't make sense. And I don't know how they do it to keep it like regulated and consistent. It scares me a little bit because seed is a really big deal. And if people are like really focused on wanting that seed, I want to make sure that it's good for them. And that's a whole other business. Part of floriculture.
Is there any cut flowers that you would not recommend for like a raised flower bed or pot?
Like a container garden or like a square plot?
Like mine is, I think, is 6x4.
6x4. I would not recommend to anyone ever growing apple of Peru. You'll see it in Florette's book and it looks really beautiful and like a really cool greenery. It spreads out and becomes a gigantic bush and it's like 10 feet tall and it's reseeds itself like crazy and becomes a weed. So definitely not that one. Other things would be, I think it just depends on what you're wanting to grow. Anything can kind of grow in that spacing. when we talk about spacing and design for things, you can fit so much in a small place. So that you said 6x4. Is
Yeah,
yours?
6 feet by 4 feet is what
Yeah.
mine is.
Yeah, you can probably fit like 45 plants in there with the like standard 9 to 6 inch spacing. So you can do a mix of things, but I would stay away from the really big ones that branch out a lot. Lysianthus are beautiful. They're really hard to start from seed, and they're one of the most like prized flowers. But I'd say if you're starting out, don't take it personally if they don't work out, because they are tricky, and you have to start them in January for them to bloom in August. So that just kind of takes up space and doesn't always flower when you could have equally as beautiful flowers.
Do you think at your farm?
I do, yeah, and it's something that I am really excited to offer more of. Like I said, I really started this farm to connect people and to feel connected to people, and the U-Pick last year was kind of the first year I did it, and it was really rewarding, and it's really fun way to share in the excitement of local flowers. And there's so many different varieties that you won't see in a flower shop or in a grocery store, and you can see its whole habit growing in the field, and that's really beautiful and exciting. So yes, and I'll have those dates as the season shows itself what it's going to be. It could be an early season, it could be a late season, it's hard telling, but usually mid-July it starts.
I was going to tell her also that if you grow dahlias, the tubers, I don't know if you know about tubers, could be like multiply, so they're so.
I was talking to a friend from Seattle and they're like, dahlias are amazing, but then hearing you say that, it's like, no, having been in Montana, I've heard that they're like, it can be hard to store, but it can also be good.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of annoying. But yeah, it's fun to see how many you can get, so. Even if you just say like.
Yeah, that multiplies and becomes like 10 tubers the next year. So it's a good way to save stock, and you can trade them with friends. That's really fun too. Yeah.
But apple approved.
Apple approved.
So I do that last year. Last year was my first time growing flowers. It was super basic at my mom's house. This
Yeah.
year I have my own land, but I have the seeds sitting there. Like, I don't know if I should plant them this year or not. I should maybe just don't.
Did you like them?
I wanted to. Like, I didn't really like it. Felt like a bouquet, like Aaron, like showed them really pretty and not really.
Yeah.
I want them to work, but I don't think they
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
So maybe
I would use them as like a hedgerow. Yeah, like a wind block. But they wilt in bouquets, and they're just kind of turned into a weed, and they're everywhere. They're really easy to pull out. So maybe like a good green mulch if it hasn't gone to seed yet. But I only grow them where they have come up, and I don't plant them anymore. But and if you are gonna plant them and try them, I'd like put them away from everything.
So my mom might have lots of.
Yeah.
Apple blue gray.
They're beautiful. They have this like tomatillo like lantern, which is actually, it is really cool for design. And they dry really well.
Yeah,
And they're like a
nice.
beautiful champagne color dried thing. So, but yeah, words of weariness, I guess, with the apple of Peru. And it's something I would say if you're starting out growing. I have a couple books up here that are just like really good resources. Most of us started because we bought the Florette book, which she has a huge, awesome flower business that started as just a cut flower farm like we all are, and has grown into kind of more of a workshop based resource center for getting people excited in flower farming. I think it's a great place to start, but I would not take everything that she says as the model in which to do it. I would really urge people to try things, and if that works for them, go with that. But if something that she does doesn't work for you, don't feel like you have to stick to that mold. That is not the only way that flower farming is. There's so many flower farms that have been going on far longer than she's been doing it and are successful in other aspects. So
you want to talk about your CSA or how many membership you have still available or how much they are?
Yeah. I'm trying not to just be a shameless plug for my own farm because there's a lot of amazing farms. And we all have kind of different CSA structures. For me, it's really valuable in creating community. I have changed it every year, and this year we're doing a little less, just trying to hone it in so that CSA members can really have the most of the season and the best flowers that I can get to them. So I offer a bi-weekly share, and that's 6 weeks. It's every other week, starting mid-June and going until end of August, beginning of September. It's $200. That's that upfront cost, similar to a veggie share, where you're committing your faith in a flower farm, you're believing in them to pay it forward to them, to help them buy the seed. You're helping them buy all of the materials that they might need for the upcoming growing season in a time where we're not selling our flowers. So it really helps all farms. That's the whole CSA structure right there. And then it's almost like you get a treat that you weren't expecting because you kind of forget about it. And then you get an email from me in like May, you get excited that you have fresh blooms coming. And every week you have something different, which is really beautiful. And I keep a blog so you can learn all about the flowers and the cultivation techniques that I use. That's just what I do. There's a lot of other options. Betsy's Blossom has a bi-weekly and every weekly, or at least she did last year, and that's in Big Fork. If you're in Big Fork, if you're in Whitefish, Ghoulish Blooms, Barb Branch, she does a CSA. So wherever you are in the valley, you can find a farm that has them available. I'm in Kalispell. I don't deliver. I've found that it's kind of hard for people that live in Whitefish or Columbia Falls to actually make it down to the farm every year. So that's, or every day, every week. That's something to consider when signing up for CSA. But we still have about half available if you're interested in joining. They're really fun. Also, if you are flower farming, it's a great way to get to know your community.
I really like your presentation. I think it's done really well. Can you just reach out to what CSA is? It's an option that approaches into wiring flowers.
Yes. So a CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. Flower farming did not start it. It was usually local, small, diversified veggie farms that did. It's a way to pre-buy your veggie shares. You're buying a share, that's how they used to call it, of a farm, and you're part of the whole there. So people that buy CSAs pay early, sign up, and then they're guaranteed a certain amount of product every week, whatever the agreement is. So it's a great way to support your local farmers and also be benefiting and learning and experiencing through the seasons and really getting in touch with that seasonality when it comes.
As far as color palettes go, last year, what was the trend for the weddings and the florists what they really wanted?
Yeah, so you'll always find people wanting white and blush. It's weddings. That's kind of always there. But last summer I saw a huge rise of people wanting peach colors, which is like my favorite color ever. It's beautiful. Salmon pink is amazing. So kind of sunset palettes were really popular last year, as well as wildflowers, like a pastel wildflower with lots of yellows, blushes, orange, pinks, blues, pops of blues in there. That's really popular. Especially here, you're getting a lot of elopements for Glacier National Park. People want to match the wildflowers. So although our flowers are not wildflowers, they're definitely cultivated agricultural varieties. They are wild and they look really cool and different and kind of mimic nature in that way. Yeah, I think that those are the most prevalent ones. A lot of lavender tones, like lavender and white. And I think if you're ever planning a wedding or working with anybody that is, some people have a really big connection to like one flower and they're like, my grandma always had hydrangea. I have to have hydrangea in my wedding. Hydrangea doesn't have a great vase life. It wilts in the sun. It's not super great for wedding work. And it is seasonal. If it's out of season, you can't get hydrangea from a local flower farmer. So if they want local flowers, they have to work with what's in season. So going off of the color palette and trying to do your best to get them those flowers that they want. But I think they'll be equally as
So they gotta
happy.
get the fake ones and then mix them in the fake ones, or they don't do that.
I have never seen that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think you can, if you're a farmer florist or a florist, or a farmer who occasionally takes on floristry, it's really easy to want to bend over backwards for every client. But then at what point are you changing your values out for something that you don't believe in? So with this whole movement, I really, for my farm, and I know a lot of us, we're really dedicated to just using the blooms that we grow or our friends down the lane grow if we don't have it. And that includes like not mixing in artificial stuff as well. So keeping it very natural, wild, and local is really important for this slow flower movement.
So when you were talking about the praying mantises in your greenhouse, are they naturally occurring in the valley, or did you initially like introduce them into the game?
So I never introduced them. I do live right next door to Raven Ridge. I'm not sure if they did, but there is one native variety, and this one is not it. They're not invasive, but they're not native. So it had been introduced to the valley somewhere else, and it has now come onto my farm, and I'm excited. They're so cool. They're like this big. Yeah, and there's other beneficial ones too, like I think it's lacewing larva. I found some of,
Green base.
yeah. So they are also in the greenhouse. So between the two of them, I'm very excited. They can help take down grasshoppers and thrips and other kind of nasty pests.
If somebody wants to grow flowers to, say they have, or how would somebody find out what flowers to grow that maybe the other flower growers in the co-op aren't growing? That maybe they could grow one or two things to provide or join the co-op with? Do you have any, like,
Yeah, well, our collective is not any longer selling wholesale together. So that is something that we tried out, and I think it's one of those things that we tried. And there's some realities there with production and the just local market that didn't make sense for us. And we just want to scale it back and just provide more resources for our growers rather than leaving them like feeling extended, which was kind of how last season went. So we're just scaling it back in. But in a perfect world, we would have growers that are able to produce large amounts of like one or two crops really well, and then bring that in so we're not all competing with each other. There's not a nasty competition between the flower farmers in the valley. It's really like helpful. There's so many a lot of business to go around for all of us. But I do think diversifying and doing a crop really well and setting yourself apart from others will help your business flourish. Or just, if you enjoy to grow one thing, you grow that thing. We have some only specific like lavender farms, and they've totally found their own niche in kind of the aromatherapy and natural world of things, not just floral design. So there's that. There's like woody ornamentals are great. In order to find that out, you just kind of have to like dive into the system and check things out and talk to people and see what people are growing and find out what people want. And it changes every year. It's really fun. It's a great roller coaster. Keep it on. Yeah.
Are there any measures taken to prevent the spread of invasive species, or is it not really a concern if we're cutting them before they seed?
It is a concern. For me on my farm, I try not to like grow or cut or use anything that is considered an invasive species. You'll see tansy used, which is really invasive and allelopathic, so it like poisons the soil around it. And it's everywhere, and it's a great dried, and it's pretty, and it's a yellow pop of flower. And if people have it, they'll put it in bouquets, but it just furthers that use of it. And so part of this whole like sustainable flower farming is really not using invasive species. Apple of Peru is not a designated invasive species, but it should be. But it's close, you know, those are just like, they're essentially weeds, but they're not the same level of like noxious weed as knapweed is, or tansy, or black medic. So
Obviously, there's a lot about bees, honeybees, and all of these other great
Yes.
things. but-
yeah, trying to not be vectors for more species, which is kind of interesting. You'll be at the farmer's market, and I grow verbena, which is not noxious here or invasive, but it is in other states. And sometimes people that are visiting will come and be, how dare you grow that? So that's kind of hard. I've never had a problem with it spreading. It hasn't for me. But yeah, trying to reduce that spread is important for sure.
I really admire how much research you've done on this. Our family, on my dad's side of the family, horticulturist in Chicago. So this is just part of my area that really didn't become a focus in the last few years, and I really admire it. The question is, I appreciate you bringing out the platform of what it takes to grow a flower and form country, ship it on, bring it in, unload it, ship it to the supplier, right from the store, flower shop. Okay, so taking that into consideration, it's coming from another region of the world. If we grow here local, is there anything in your research that shows, let's just say, when you're around flowers in your home and you're enjoying that's all. Is there any theories that show it's better to use that from our environment rather than a foreign environment?
Yes, so when we talk about pesticide reliance of flowers that are coming from those, they're sprayed and fumigated. So just pesticide on the blooms. You're touching that directly. If you're smelling it, you're engulfing it into your nostrils. Like, it's really harmful. And florists, there's been research shown that like florists have a higher percentage of cancer rates because of their working with these things. So if you're getting local flowers, they smell better, they're safe, you can eat them, you can bury your face in them, you can touch them, and it's not going to harm you or your pets. Having those carcinogenic fumes coming out, they don't go away from the flower once it's harvested and distributed. So
Which was the flower that caused your skin to burn and cut it?
yeah. That's euphorbia. It's, if you're farming, sometimes you'll find that you have an allergic reaction to some flowers. It's not a bad one. Some people aren't allergic to it, but it's toxic to others. So another thing, that and Queen Anne's lace are pretty big ones. So yeah.
We should wrap up. Thank you
Yeah,
so
I don't know where
much.
it went.